They say that right before you die, your entire life flashes before your eyes in a rapid, cinematic montage. But when the back of your head slams against the hard, wet concrete of a swimming pool edge, it's not your past that flashes in front of you. It is the terrifying, blinding realization of how fragile your present really is, and how easily the future you had so carefully mapped out can shatter into a million jagged, unrecognizable pieces. If I had known that the sickening crack echoing in my skull would be the exact sound of my entire world breaking apart, I would never have gone to that party. I would have stayed home, safely wrapped in the comforting illusion that the man I loved was actually mine. But life rarely gives us warnings. Instead, it gives us slippery tiles, loud music, and a split-second decision to play a harmless prank that ends up peeling back the beautiful, deceptive skin of the reality you thought you knew. His name was Liam. For 3 years, Liam had been my sun, my gravity, the absolute center of my universe. He was the kind of guy who commanded a room the second he walked into it, tall, effortlessly charismatic, with a laugh that made you feel like you were the luckiest person in the world just to be allowed to hear it. When we first met, his attention felt like a spotlight. I was a quiet, slightly clumsy girl who preferred dog-eared novels to crowded dance floors, but Liam had pulled me into his orbit, making me feel beautiful, desired, and infinitely special. For the first 2 years, we were inseparable. We built a life together, filled with inside jokes, lazy Sunday mornings, and promises of a house with a wraparound porch somewhere far from the city noise. I loved him with a fierce, blinding devotion. I would have walked through fire for him. But lately, the spotlight had started to shift. It wasn't a sudden darkness, but rather a slow, agonizing dimming of the light. Over the last 6 months, Liam had become distant. It started with small things, texts left on read for hours, canceled dinner plans because something came up at work, a distracted look in his eyes when I talked about my day. He was constantly on his phone, typing furiously, only to flip the screen face down the moment I walked into the room. Whenever I tried to bridge the gap, asking if we were okay, he would flash that practiced, brilliant smile, kiss the top of my head, and call me paranoid. "You overthink too much, Clara," he would say, his tone laced with a faint, dismissive irritation. Everything is perfectly fine. So I believed him. I swallowed my anxiety, painted on a smile, and tried to be the easygoing, fun girlfriend he wanted. I convinced myself that we were just going through a rough patch, a natural lull in a long-term relationship. I poured all my energy into making things work, ignoring the cold, gnawing feeling in the pit of my stomach that whispered I was losing him. Then came the midsummer pool party at his wealthy friend's sprawling estate. It was a muggy, humid August night. The air smelled of chlorine, expensive perfume, and spilling alcohol. Neon pink and blue lights glowed from beneath the surface of the massive swimming pool, casting rippling, ghostly shadows on the faces of the laughing crowd. The bass from the oversized speakers thumped against my chest, making my heart beat in an erratic rhythm. I was sitting on a lounge chair, nursing a plastic cup of lukewarm soda, feeling entirely out of place in my simple floral sundress and its deceived designer swimwear. Liam had abandoned me within 5 minutes of our arrival. He was on the other side of the pool, surrounded by a group of people, holding court as usual. He had a drink in one hand and was gesturing animatedly with the other. Standing uncomfortably close to him was a girl I vaguely recognized, a tall, stunning blonde named Maya, who was laughing entirely too hard at whatever he was saying. I watched as Liam casually rested his hand on the bare skin of her lower back. A sharp prick of jealousy stung my eyes, but I forced it away. "Don't be that girl," I scolded myself. "He's just being friendly. You're staring a hole through him, you know?" I jumped slightly, turning to see Ethan sliding onto the edge of the lounge chair next to mine. Ethan was Liam's best friend, though you could hardly find two people more entirely opposite. Where Liam was loud and dazzling, Ethan was quiet, observant, and grounded. He had dark, intense eyes that always seemed to see a little too much, and a calm, steady presence that I had secretly always found comforting. While Liam forgot my birthday last year until an hour before midnight, Ethan was the one who remembered I was allergic to strawberries and quietly swapped out the dessert plate at a group dinner before I even had to ask. We weren't incredibly close. I was Liam's girl, and he was Liam's guy, but there was an unspoken mutual respect between us. "I'm not staring," I lied defensively, taking a sip of my drink to avoid his gaze. "Just people watching." Ethan didn't push it. He just handed me a chilled bottle of sparkling water. Here, I saw you grimacing at whatever sugary concoction is in that cup. You prefer sparkling, right? Yeah, I breathed, genuinely touched. Thank you, Ethan. Don't mention it. He looked out across the water, his gaze landing exactly where mine had been on Liam and the blonde. I saw a brief, subtle tightening of Ethan's jaw, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes, before he carefully looked away. You should go over there, he said softly. Remind him who he came with. He was right. I was tired of sitting on the sidelines of my own relationship. I wanted my boyfriend back. I wanted him to look at me, really look at me, and remember why he loved me. An impulsive idea sparked in my mind. I would go over there, but I wouldn't be the needy, nagging girlfriend. I would be fun. I would be spontaneous. I'd sneak up behind him, maybe push him into the water, and we would laugh together like we used to. With a newfound surge of determination, I stood up. I smoothed down my dress, took a deep breath, and began navigating my way around the edge of the pool. The music seemed to swell, drowning out the chatter. My eyes were fixed on Liam's back. I was walking fast, fueled by a desperate mix of love and a need for validation. I was only 5 feet away from him. I reached out my hand, ready to tap his shoulder. But I never noticed the puddle of spilled tequila and pool water slicking the smooth ceramic tiles. My left heel hit the puddle. Instantly, all friction vanished. It happened so fast that my brain couldn't even process the falling sensation before gravity violently claimed me. My legs flew out from under me, tearing my hand away from Liam's shoulder. The world tilted upside down in a dizzying blur of neon lights and horrified faces. Then came the impact. The back of my skull struck the unforgiving concrete edge of the pool with a brutal, sickening crack. A blinding flash of white light exploded behind my eyes, followed instantly by an agonizing, vibrating pain that shot down my spine. The air was violently punched from my lungs. I dimly registered the sound of a woman screaming, the sudden splash of water, and then a heavy, suffocating darkness rushed in to swallow me whole. Consciousness didn't return all at once. It dripped back in slowly, like freezing water from a leaky faucet. First came the muffled, underwater distortion of voices. Then the sharp, metallic taste of copper in my mouth. Finally, a heavy, throbbing bass drum began pounding furiously behind my eyes. I blinked, my vision swimming through a hazy kaleidoscope of blinding neon lights and fragmented silhouettes. I was lying flat on my back on the soaking wet concrete. The music had been cut. A circle of anxious faces hovered above me, blocking out the night sky. And right in the center, looking down at me, was Liam. He wasn't crying. He wasn't holding my hand. In fact, he wasn't even kneeling beside me. He was standing a few feet back, his arms crossed over his chest, looking down at me with an expression that wasn't terror or devastating concern. It was annoyance. He looked like I was an inconvenience that had ruined the vibe of his perfect night. A medic from the estate's security team was flashing a penlight into my eyes, asking me what day it was. I opened my mouth to answer, to say that I was fine, that it was just a stupid slip. But as I looked at Liam at the cold, detached irritation in the eyes of the man I had loved for 3 years, something inside me snapped. It wasn't my skull, it was my patience. It was my pride. The concussion must have clouded my judgment, but a strange, reckless impulse suddenly seized me. I wanted to shake him. I wanted to crack through that polished, untouchable exterior and see the raw, desperate boy who used to swear he couldn't breathe without me. I wanted him to drop to his knees, pull me into his arms, and beg me to be okay. What if I forgot? The thought whispered in my dizzy brain. If I was a blank slate, would he fight to win me back? It was a terrible, childish idea, born of a desperate, starved heart. I decided in that split second to play a prank. A test, just for a minute or two, just until I saw the panic in his eyes, just until he proved to me that I still mattered. Hey, the medic said gently, tapping my shoulder. Can you hear me? Do you know where you are? I let my eyes wander, purposely making them wide and vacant. I looked at the medic, then at the strangers, and finally let my gaze rest on Liam. I frowned, letting a tremor of fake fear enter my voice. I don't know, I whispered, clutching my head. Where am I? What happened? A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers. I kept my eyes locked on Liam, waiting for the facade to break, waiting for him to rush forward. Clara, Liam said, his voice tight. He finally took a step closer, but he didn't reach out to touch me. Stop messing around, get up. Clara? I repeated, tasting my own name as if it were a foreign word. I pushed myself up onto my elbows, wincing at the very real spike of pain in my skull. I looked up at him, pouring every ounce of vulnerability I could muster into my expression. Is that my name? Who are you? Silence fell over the patio. It was so quiet I could hear the faint hum of the pool filters. I watched Liam's face. I expected his jaw to drop. I expected him to pale, to shout for an ambulance, to fall apart. Instead, I saw something that froze the blood in my veins. I saw the gears turning behind his beautiful, deceitful eyes. He didn't look panicked, he looked calculating. His gaze flicked rapidly from my face to the crowd of our friends who were watching in stunned silence, and then, slowly, to Maya, the blonde girl who was standing just a few feet away, watching him with breathless anticipation. I saw the exact moment the realization hit him. The realization that if I had no memory of him, I had no memory of us. No memory of the 3 years we spent together. No memory of the apartment we shared, the promises we made, or the fact that I was his girlfriend. To him, I supposed amnesia wasn't a tragedy, it was a loophole. It was a get-out-of-jail-free card handed to him on a silver platter. Are you? I pushed the prank forward, my voice trembling now not from acting, but from a sudden creeping terror. Are you my boyfriend? Liam looked at me. His eyes were completely dead. The boy I loved was gone, replaced by a stranger who saw an opportunity and was ruthless enough to take it. He let out a short, nervous laugh, running a hand through his hair. Me? He said, his voice ringing loud and clear across the silent pool deck. No, God, no, we barely know each other. My heart stopped. The breath vanished from my lungs. The prank died instantly in my throat, choking me. I tried to speak, to scream that I was joking, that he was lying, but my vocal cords were paralyzed by sheer, unadulterated shock. Actually, Liam continued, turning around and grabbing someone by the arm. He violently yanked Ethan out of the crowd and shoved him forward until Ethan stumbled and nearly fell beside me. This is your guy, Ethan. He brought you here. I'm just his friend. A collective murmur of confusion swept through the crowd. Some people knew us, but many were Maya and Liam's new, wealthy acquaintances who had no idea who I was. Ethan caught his balance, staring at Liam with absolute horror. His dark eyes were wide, his face pale with revulsion. Liam, Ethan snarled, his voice low and dangerous. What the actual fuck are you doing? Just help your girlfriend up, man, Liam said, shooting Ethan a warning, desperate look, silently begging him to play along with the monstrous lie. I'm not doing this, Ethan spat, taking a step back from Liam as if he were diseased. He looked down at me, seeing the absolute devastation shattering across my face. He knew, Ethan knew instantly that I was faking it, and he knew exactly what Liam was doing to me. I'm not playing your sick games, Liam. I said she's with you. Liam practically shouted, cutting Ethan off. Before Ethan could say another word, before I could find the strength to stand up and end the nightmare, Liam turned his back on me. He didn't just walk away. He turned directly to Maya. He looked at her, flashed that dazzling, magnetic smile that used to be mine, and wrapped his arm around her waist. Right there. Right in front of me, while I sat on the wet concrete nursing a head injury. He pulled Maya flush against his chest, tangled his hand in her blonde hair, and kissed her. It wasn't a quick peck. It was a deep, hungry, possessive kiss, a public declaration of his newfound freedom. The world didn't just tilt. It completely shattered. The pain in my head was instantly eclipsed by the sound of my own heart ripping straight down the middle. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I was trapped in a prison of my own making, forced to watch the man I would have died for throw me away like a piece of garbage just because he thought I wouldn't remember it. The humiliation was a physical weight, pressing me down into the cold, wet tiles. The laughter, the gasps, the whispers of the crowd faded into a dull roar. I was drowning on dry land. The sound of their kiss was the loudest thing I had ever heard. It drowned out the murmur of the crowd, the humming of the pool filters, and the frantic pounding of my own heart. It was a wet, sloppy, horrifying sound that etched itself directly into my brain, bypassing the concussion entirely. The prank was over. The joke was dead, and it had taken my entire life down with it. A sudden, violent surge of adrenaline sliced through the agonizing fog in my head. I didn't care about the pain anymore. I didn't care about the blood that was now slowly trickling down the back of my neck, dampening the collar of my dress. I forced my hands against the slippery concrete and pushed myself up. My legs shook violently, threatening to give out, but pure unadulterated rage held me upright. "Liam!" I screamed. My voice tore out of my throat, raw and ragged, shattering the heavy silence of the patio. He slowly pulled away from Maya. He didn't flinch. He didn't look caught. He calmly wiped a smudge of her lip gloss from his mouth with the back of his thumb and turned to face me. "I remember," I cried out, taking a wobbly step toward him. Hot, humiliating tears finally spilled over my eyelashes, burning my cheeks. "It was a joke. I was faking it, Liam. I'm Clara. I'm your girlfriend of 3 years. How could you do this?" I waited for the realization to hit him. I waited for the horror of what he had just done to wash over his face. I expected him to pale, to stammer, to beg for my forgiveness in front of everyone. Instead, Liam let out a long, exaggerated sigh. He looked at the crowd, shaking his head with a perfectly manufactured expression of deep, sorrowful pity. "Man, she hit her head really hard," Liam announced to the onlookers, his voice dripping with condescension. He looked at the security guard who was still hovering nearby. "You need to call an ambulance, buddy. Her brain is completely scrambled. She's hallucinating." "What?" I gasped, the air knocked out of me all over again. I stared at him, my mind unable to process the sheer sociopathic audacity of his lie. "Liam, stop it. Tell them. Tell them who I am." "Ethan, get your girl," Liam snapped, his voice suddenly hard and commanding. He looked at Maya, wrapping a protective arm around her shoulders as if I were the threat. "She's having some kind of psychotic break. She's been obsessed with me all night. It's creeping Maya out." The crowd began to whisper. I saw cell phones coming out, camera lenses catching the neon light, pointing directly at me, the crazy bleeding girl making a scene at a high society pool party. Maya looked at me with open disgust, whispering something into Liam's ear that made him smirk. He was gaslighting me. He was taking my stupid, desperate prank and weaponizing it, burying me alive under it so he could walk away clean. And the worst part was, it was working. I was dizzy, bleeding, crying hysterically, and babbling about a relationship the host of the party had just vehemently denied. I looked completely insane. "Liam, please," I begged, the rage draining out of me, leaving only a hollow, bottomless despair. My knees buckled. I was going to fall again. But before I could hit the ground, 2 strong hands gripped my arms, hauling me flush against a solid, warm chest. It was Ethan. He didn't look at me. His dark eyes were locked on Liam, and they were blazing with a fury so intense it seemed to lower the temperature of the air around us. Ethan's jaw was clenched so tight I thought his teeth might shatter. "You are a monster," Ethan said. His voice wasn't a shout. It was a lethal, quiet snarl that somehow carried perfectly across the water. "You are a pathetic, cowardly piece of garbage." "Ethan, chill out," Liam started, holding his hands up defensively, but the smirk was finally sliding off his face. "Don't speak to me," Ethan cut him off, his grip on my arms tightening protectively. "Don't ever speak to me again." "We're done, Liam. You're dead to me." Without waiting for a response, Ethan shifted his hold, wrapping his arm firmly around my waist to support my weight. "Come on," he whispered to me, his voice instantly softening as he looked down at my pale, tear-streaked face. "Let's get out of here, Clara. I've got you. Don't look at him. Just look at me." He guided me through the parting crowd of staring strangers. I pressed my face into his shoulder, hiding my tears, letting him navigate the labyrinth of the mansion until the heavy oak front doors closed behind us, cutting off the suffocating bass of the music. The humid night air hit me, but it offered no relief. As soon as Ethan helped me into the passenger seat of his SUV, the adrenaline completely evaporated. The physical trauma of the fall crashed into me like a freight train. The world spun violently. I leaned my head against the cool leather seat and sobbed, a deep, ugly, guttural sound that tore at my ribs. Ethan didn't try to offer empty platitudes. He didn't tell me it was going to be okay. He just started the engine, his face pale and grim in the dashboard lights, and sped down the long, winding driveway toward the main road. "I'm taking you to VEA," he said quietly after a few miles, glancing at the bloody tissue I was holding to the back of my head. "No," I choked out, squeezing my eyes shut. "Take me home, please, Ethan. Take me to our apartment. I need to pack my things. I need to leave before he gets back." Ethan's hands gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned stark white. He slowed the car down, pulling over onto the dark gravel shoulder of the deserted road. He put the car in park and killed the engine. The sudden silence in the cabin was deafening. He turned in his seat to face me. The street lamp overhead cast long, harsh shadows across his face. He looked physically ill. "Clara," he began, his voice thick with a guilt that didn't belong to him. He reached out, hesitating for a second, before gently resting his hand over my trembling fingers. "I can't take you back to that apartment." "Why?" I whispered, my heart rate spiking with a fresh wave of panic. "Did he lock me out? Is my name not on the lease?" "No," Ethan swallowed hard, his dark eyes shining with unshed tears of absolute fury and profound sorrow. "No, Clara, it's worse than tonight. It's so much worse." He squeezed my hand, bracing me for the impact. "Maya wasn't just some random girl he met tonight," Ethan said, his voice trembling. "They've been together for 6 months. He met her at a corporate retreat, the nights he was working late, the weekends he had to go out of town to visit his parents. He was with her." I stopped breathing. The pain in my head vanished, replaced by a cold, sprawling numbness that spread all the way to my fingertips. 6 months. Half a year of my life, a complete fabricated joke. But the apartment, I stammered blindly, desperate to cling to anything real. "I found a receipt in his jacket last week. From a jeweler, a deposit for a ring," I thought. "I thought we were just stressed because he was going to propose." Ethan closed his eyes, a single tear escaping and tracking down his jawline. When he opened them again, the absolute heartbreak in his expression was the final nail in my coffin. "He is proposing, Clara," Ethan whispered, his voice breaking. "He's taking her to Paris on Tuesday. That's why you was acting so weird lately. He wasn't going to break up with you tonight. He was going to pack his things while you were at work on Monday, leave the keys on the counter, and just disappear." The silence that followed Ethan's confession was heavier than the darkness surrounding the SUV. I sat there, paralyzed, feeling the foundations of my life crumble away. It wasn't just that he was leaving me. It was the meticulous, cold-blooded planning. He had been looking at me every day for 6 months, kissing me, sleeping next to me, all while building a completely separate future with someone else. He was going to let me go to work on Tuesday morning, and by the time I came home, he would have been gone, leaving me with nothing but questions and an empty closet. The nausea hit me again, not from the concussion, but from sheer physical revulsion. I fumbled for the door handle, pushed it open, and retched onto the gravel. I retched until my stomach was empty and my throat burned, my sobs dry and racking. Ethan didn't touch me. He just waited, his hand still on my trembling shoulder, offering a silent, agonizing support. When I finally pulled myself back into the car, wiping my mouth with the back of my hand, the despair was gone. A cold, crystalline rage took its place. The pounding in my head was severe, but it was nothing compared to the fury burning in my chest. He thought I was crazy. He wanted everyone to think I was a delusional stalker so he could keep his hands clean. I looked at Ethan, my eyes wide and blazing in the semi-darkness. "Turn the car around," I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. It was flat, hard, and terrifyingly calm. Ethan stared at me, horrified. "Clara, no, look at you. You're bleeding, you're in shock. We need a hospital." I gripped his arm, my nails digging into his skin. "I do not need a doctor, Ethan. I need to look him in the eye. I'm not letting him walk away from this believing his own lie. I'm not letting him fly to Paris on Tuesday thinking he won. Turn this car around." Ethan saw something in my expression that stopped his argument. He saw that if he didn't turn around, I would jump out of the moving car. He swore under his breath, slammed his hand against the steering wheel, and whipped the SUV into a violent, screeching U-turn. We flew back down the dark roads, the engine roaring, mirroring the chaos inside me. When we pulled up to the estate, the party was winding down, but still active. Guests were lingering on the driveway, waiting for valets. Music still thumped from the back patio. I didn't wait for Ethan to park. I opened the door while the car was still rolling and stumbled out onto the pavement. My legs shook violently and a sharp, blinding pain exploded in my skull with every step, but I didn't care. I walked right through the front door. The house was a blur of expensive furniture and lingering guests who recoiled as I passed. I must have looked like a specter from a horror movie, blood matting the hair on the side of my neck, face streaked with tears and dirt, dress damp and rumpled. I didn't care. I followed the music to the back patio. They were there. Of course they were. Liam and Maya were standing near the edge of the pool, right where it had happened. They were surrounded by a small circle of their friends, laughing. Liam was holding a fresh flute of champagne in one hand, his other arm still draped possessively around Maya's waist. He looked happy. He looked relieved. He looked like a man who had successfully disposed of a problem. I pushed through the circle. The laughter stopped instantly, as if someone had cut a wire. Heads turned, gasping. Liam saw me. The smirk froze on his face. His eyes widened, not with fear, but with an arrogant, boiling irritation. He actually rolled his eyes. Oh, for Christ's sake, he spat, taking a step toward me, shielding Maya. Security. I thought I told you. I didn't let him finish. I stopped 2 feet in front of him. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. My voice was low, steady, and loud enough to carry through the sudden, suffocating silence that fell over the patio. I remember everything, Liam, I said, my voice cutting through the humid air like a knife. I'm not hallucinating. I'm not having a psychotic break. And I'm not a joke. Clara, stop making a scene, Liam hissed, his jaw tight, his knuckles wet around the stem of the champagne flute. You're hurt. You're not thinking straight. Ethan, where are you? Get her out of here. Ethan knows, I said, a cruel smile finally touching my lips. He told me, Liam. He told me everything. I turned my gaze slowly to Maya. She was staring at me, her eyes wide with a mix of confusion and creeping apprehension. Maya, I said, addressing her directly. You think he won a prize? You think he loves you? I took another step forward, ignoring the dizziness that made the ground beneath me seem to pitch like a ship at sea. He didn't bring me here tonight to break up with me. He was going to let me go to work on Tuesday, and while I was gone, he was going to pack his bags, leave the keys on the counter, and just disappear to Paris with you. He was too much of a coward to even break up with a woman he's been with for 3 years. A murmur of genuine shock rippled through the crowd. I saw people who had sneered at me before now looking at Liam with varying expressions of disgust and horror. Maya looked at Liam, pushing his arm away from her. Liam, she whispered, her voice trembling. What is she talking about? Who is she? Liam's face went crimson. He looked around at the judging eyes of his friends, his carefully constructed world collapsing around him. He looked at me, and in his eyes I saw an absolute murderous hatred. You crazy bitch, he snarled, dropping the act completely. He raised his hand, the heavy crystal champagne flute catching the light. I don't know if he intended to hit me or just smash the glass, but the intention was violent. Before he could move, a dark silhouette burst through the crowd. Ethan tackled Liam, sending the champagne flute flying to shatter on the concrete. They hit the ground hard, a tangle of limbs and fury. Maya screamed. The crowd erupted into chaos. Security guards rushed forward to pull them apart. I didn't watch the fight. I stood there, and the wind felt empty. The rage drained away, leaving only a hollow, bottomless exhaustion. The physical pain in my head suddenly intensified tenfold, becoming a searing, unbearable white light. The voices of the screaming crowd began to sound like they were underwater. The world tilted again, and this time I couldn't stop it. The last thing I saw was Ethan breaking free from a security guard, his face a mask of terror as he lunged toward me. I felt his arms catch me just before the ground rushed up to meet me, and then the world went black. The rhythmic, sterile beep, beep, beep of a heart monitor was the first thing that anchored me back to reality. I didn't open my eyes right away. I lay there, feeling the crisp, starchy hospital sheets against my skin and the dull, throbbing ache radiating from a heavy bandage wrapped around my head. The sickening smell of chlorine and spilt tequila was gone, replaced by the sharp, undeniable scent of antiseptic and bleach. When I finally forced my heavy eyelids apart, the harsh fluorescent lights of the hospital room made me wince. I turned my head slightly, fighting a wave of nausea, and there he was. Ethan was slumped in a hard plastic chair beside my bed, his long legs stretched out in front of him. He looked like he had been through a war. His usually immaculate dark hair was a mess. There was a swelling purple bruise high on his right cheekbone, and the knuckles of his right hand were split and wrapped in white gauze. But what caught my breath wasn't the evidence of the fight. It was the fact that his left hand was resting on the edge of my mattress, his fingers gently, protectively curled over mine. As if sensing my gaze, he shifted. His dark eyes fluttered open, heavy with exhaustion, but the second they locked onto mine, a profound, Overwhelming relief washed over his battered face. He sat up straight, instantly leaning closer, his thumb brushing a feather-light stroke across the back of my hand. "Hey," he rasped, his voice thick with sleep and unshed emotion. "You're awake." "God, Clara, you're awake." "Hey," I whispered back, my throat feeling like sandpaper. I managed a weak, lopsided smile, looking at his bruised face. "You look terrible." Ethan let out a breath that was half laugh, half sob, resting his forehead against the edge of the mattress near my arm. "You should see the other guy," he mumbled into the sheets. Over the next few hours, as doctors came in and out to check my vitals and confirm that my severe concussion hadn't caused any permanent brain damage, Ethan filled in the blanks of the nightmare I had left behind. When I collapsed, the entire party had unraveled. The security guards had to physically drag Ethan off Liam, but the damage to Liam's pristine, untouchable reputation had already been permanently done. Maya, horrified by the monstrous truth of what she had unknowingly been a part of, slapped Liam across the face in front of everyone, threw her champagne on him and left in an Uber. The wealthy friends he had been trying so desperately to impress turned their backs on him in absolute disgust. "He called me this morning while you were unconscious," Ethan said quietly, his jaw tightening. "He was crying, begging me to talk to you, to tell you he made a mistake, that he was just panicked. He lost the girl, he lost his trip to Paris, and he lost his entire social circle in the span of 10 minutes. What did you say to him?" I asked, feeling a strange, hollow detachment at the mention of Liam's name. The blinding love I had felt for 3 years had been completely incinerated on that pool deck, leaving nothing but ashes. Ethan looked me dead in the eye, his dark gaze steady and fiercely protective. I told him that if he ever came within 100 yards of you again, the beating I gave him last night would look like a warm-up. I stayed in the hospital for 2 days. When I was discharged, I didn't go back to the apartment I had shared with Liam. I never stepped foot in it again. Ethan went with a few of my friends, packed up every single thing I owned, and left Liam's spare key sitting dead center on the kitchen counter the exact way Liam had planned to leave me. Healing wasn't instantaneous. You don't just walk away from 3 years of your life without carrying the phantom weight of the betrayal. There were nights I woke up crying, mourning the illusion of the future I thought I had, but I wasn't doing it alone. Ethan never pushed, he never crowded me. He was simply there. He was the quiet, steady gravity that kept me from floating away. He brought me groceries when I was too dizzy to drive. He sat on my new couch and read books in silence just so I wouldn't have to be in an empty room. He remembered my tea orders, my obscure movie quotes, and the fact that I was terrified of thunderstorms. It took me 6 months to realize that I wasn't just healing. I was falling. I was falling for a man who didn't need a spotlight to shine. A man whose love wasn't a performance for a crowd, but a quiet, unshakable foundation built on profound respect and devastating honesty. It happened on a rainy Tuesday evening. We were sitting on the floor of my new apartment, eating takeout on paper plates, laughing about something incredibly stupid. I looked at him, at the way his eyes crinkled at the corners, the gentle, unguarded way he looked back at me, and the realization hit me with the force of a tidal wave. I reached out, my fingers tracing the faint, lingering scar on his cheekbone from that night at the pool. He stopped laughing, his breath catching in his throat as he looked down at my hand, and then up into my eyes. "Why did you stay, Ethan?" I asked softly, the question that had been burning in my chest for half a year finally spilling out. "Why did you fight for me that night?" Ethan reached up, his hand covering mine, pressing my palm gently against his cheek. The intensity in his dark eyes was breathtaking. "Because I saw him taking you for granted every single day," he whispered, his voice vibrating with a raw, buried truth. "Because I had to sit back and watch the woman I had been entirely, hopelessly in love with for 2 years, break her own heart trying to fix a man who didn't deserve her." He leaned in, his forehead resting against mine. "When you fell that night, Clara, I thought I lost you before I ever even had the chance to tell you." I closed my eyes, a single happy tear slipping down my cheek. I leaned into him, closing the distance, and when our lips met, there were no fireworks, no performing, no desperate need to prove anything to anyone. It was just real. It felt like coming home to a house I never knew I owned. Sometimes I traced the small, hidden scar on the back of my scalp underneath my hair. They say your life flashes before your eyes before you die. But that night on the wet concrete, my life didn't end. My life, my real, authentic, beautiful life was just beginning. I had to crack my head open to finally wake up, but as I sit here now watching Ethan smile at me from across our living room, I know with absolute certainty it was the greatest fall I ever took.